Well, hello. For those that you don't know me, my name is Alberto. I have, I do some gardening projects, and we've been working with you guys in what is it? Issy? That you
Easy
call it?
and yes.
Yeah, and some of yes. So today I'm going to talk about you of some sustainable habits that we can do around the garden. So I'll show you a presentation.
Mm, ah,
Okay, so I made this for you so you can understand better why it's important to do each one of these. Um, Basically, everything that involves cooking, uh, we can create something, a habit around it, so that we can have a more sustainable life. And what I mean about this is when we cook, we have to make some purchases. If we make these purchases responsibly, not just environmentally, but also economically and socially, we go through great lengths actually to make some changes. Um, Inside of this would come the bulk purchasing. If we can consume in a way that involves less of one-time use kind of plastic or waste, it's better. So if we try to bulk purchase everything or most of the things we use for cooking, that would be great. Um, Also, on that part is very important that we start to make the correct questions about where our food comes from. When we do our veg account, that I'll explain to you in a minute, it's very, very important that we start to be more conscious about the sources that we get our food from, and not only just like what stores do we buy them in, but also where do those stores actually get them from. How is this how is this being produced, where is it being produced, by whom? That is very, very important, so that we be more conscious about not only how these foods affect us in our body, but also how the purchase of these foods and in general everything we purchase can change or have an impact socially and economically. So once we've done that, once we've purchased responsibly, then there's a lot of ways that we can use food more efficiently. So we're gonna explore a little bit more on those toppings, and the main tools we're gonna use to create a more sustainable life in this scenario will be composting and, of course, growing our own food or home gardening. Uh, we tend to think about home gardening as needing to have a lot of like extensions or a lot of resources like soils and different containers, but reality is that we can start a home garden very, very easily with very few things. So
no, no.
um, I will show you the next. Okay, so for the first
Ay, perdón.
So for the first habit, we will do. This is our weekly volume consumption or our veg count. This is actually a really simple task and a very, very important one to have a more deeper understanding on what do we eat, how many of it, and eventually where does it come from. So it's a very, very simple thing to do. We just create a list. For instance, I put these examples, and we put down weekly how many of these veggies we ate, right? Once we have the week one, we should go for the 2-week one, and then for the 3-week one, and eventually the month. If we have the data of how much of each of these we consume, then we can have a very clear idea on how many space should we need for being self-sustainable, or in the other case, the space we have, how can we use it more efficiently? So that's very, very important before we think about putting our own home garden. And it also will help us later on to make the bulk cooking. So to this point, I would like to know if any of you have any uh, commentary or doubt about this part, the weekly volume or veggie count.
Why did you pick those 4? Are those the 4 that grow best here,
Oh,
or?
no, that's a good question. No, it's not about these 4 are just examples. What's really important is that you choose the ones that you consume the most, because these will be eventually your planning for your own garden. So it should be based on your own consumption. So for instance, we here at the house, we have a lot of tomatoes. So probably we will have, I don't know, like 6 tomatoes probably a week. That turns into probably 1 kilo per week. And if you multiply that by 4 weeks, then you have 4 kilos of tomatoes. So you should be able to grow 4 kilos of tomatoes a month. So that in plants, you would have to have around 3 tomato plants to pull that out. So that's why it's really important that we can see very graphically how much or how many of these veggies we are consuming per week, so that we have a more clear view of how many plants we need and how much space do we need for those plants. So that's the ultimate goal. So no, going back to your answers, it's not important. These 4, it's just an example. These 4 or 5 should be your own picking, the ones that you really, really consume every week. For instance, if you have an artichoke every 6 months, don't put artichoke, and try to to keep it. I know it's hard, but nothing that comes from a tree, because that would be like going pro from rookie. So you don't want that. Try only veggies, and once you get the veggies, you can start from there. So any other question on when you talk? Aquí están las preguntas.
Sí. Bulk zero waste stores in Providencia.
Oh, I'll get to the
What
bulk part.
Bulk foods. Ajá, es más que nada todo lo de.
Okay, okay, the bulk part. So weekly cooking, this or batch cooking, it's a great way to save a lot of things. It's the second step of our previous habit. If we know how or what are we going to eat for a week, then that means we have to plan our food, and that means that we have to be more conscious about it. So if we've done our volume consumption for maybe 2 weeks, then it's even easier for us to create a weekly plan because we know approximately the amount of food that we'll be needing per week. So it's easier for us to say like, okay, we will have X amount of rice, or we will have X amount of veggies in a stir fry, or maybe just in different ways. If we do this, it's more efficient in the way we cook. It's more efficient in the way we use our time. And the most important part is that in order to be successful at doing this, we have to pay attention to what we eat, and we have to invest time and think in our food plan. So that's really the goal of batch cooking. And the plus of that is that it's just really easy to do one day of cooking, and then the rest of the 4 or 5 days just like make a mix of all of these and be able to eat correctly in a more efficient way. One important part of this, it's the well, how you will put it away, or how you will be able to store it. For this part, is really important that all of you understand the process that's going on when your foods are alive. That means that they have bacteria or even fungi, and that's good in most cases. It's the natural thing to do. And what that means is that all of these foods are in decay. From the moment basically you pick it up from the ground to the moment that you put it in your mouth, it's being processed or digested, and it's being transformed. So what we try to do in storage is to stop that process of decomposition, or pause it because you can't really stop it, and to do it in a slowly manner. So all that you have to think about is when you are storing especially leafy greens, you want something to absorb the moist. So every time you store away leafy greens, you should put a napkin or any paper that can absorb moist. And on top of it, you can put your leafy greens. That way they will stay crunchy, and they will stay good for more time. Also, if you have a tight seal, it works great for storing food up. And I would really suggest for you to slowly move from plastic to glass, and that's really, really good. I don't know if any of you have any questions to this point. No? All good? Okay. Okay, so we got to the plant health part. This is really actually just more efficient way to use our food. We normally tend to think of our food as, especially like vegetables and fruits, as we ate them, and then whatever we don't eat, it's no good. But we can use whatever we didn't eat in a lot of ways. So these are two really, really simple and really, really actually useful things to do with our some of our organic waste. So you can make bug repellents. It's really important that you make your own bug repellents, even if you don't have a garden, like a veggie garden. Only if you have, even if you only have like flowers or regular plants, like house plants, it's good for you to make bug repellents because at the end of it, they're plants and you create their ecosystem. So if you're able to manage this ecosystem in a more efficient way, it's great for plants and they will be happy about it.
Que sí puede ser cualquier tipo de chile.
Yeah. So for the bug repellent, this pepper example is just one example. In the video, I actually, for the one you saw earlier, I forgot to mention, and that's why I have the garlic there. You can make this with pepper, you can make this with garlic, you can make this with onions. You can even use the tomato plant, not the tomato, but the tomato, like literally the plant leaves. You can even use tobacco, and you can use, what else? Cinnamon. Sorry. All of these, you will create basically a tea. And what we want here, sorry, it's really strong smells and flavors. So Chile works great for this. I suggest for you to open your windows. And if you have a small apartment, don't hate me for this. It'll get smelly. Oh, sorry. What you want to do is to chop the peppers. You can use the food processor if you want, and you will basically just put it to boil. Once it boils, you let it sit, and you put it through a strainer, and then you got your chile or pepper concentrate, and you'll put 1 part of water, 2 parts of water for 1 part of this mix of peppers. You want to get the hottest pepper possible. Bell peppers don't work for this. You can try chile de árbol, habanero, even serranos do great. And a very important part of this is that you can't go too much. Like, it's for you, it's better for you to do it, to overdo it than to underdone it, because you are creating a repellent, not a poison. So if you make a microdosage, then bugs get used to it, and it doesn't work. So it's really important for you to do put a lot of peppers and a lot of onion and a lot of garlic or whatever you're using to make it like really, really strong. So always you can use the criteria of a quarter of your a quarter kilo of whatever you're using, except cinnamon, uh, for creating these repellents. Okay. And
the bug repellent, is it for plants or people?
it's for both of them. It's for plants, but it normally works on people as well. And you want to put this every 15 days. The fertilizer, it works really good as well. You basically, with this fertilizer, you're getting all the potassium out of the banana peels, and that works great for plants. Potassium is one of the most important nutrients plants need. So you'll get stronger plants if you use this. It's the same process as the pepper, but this time with the bananas, and you can also put it every 15 days in a sprayer. And we're running out of time, but oh no. Okay, and finally, well, no, we're not finally, but the waste sorting, it's a really important part. This basically is to start your own compost. There's a lot of ways of starting compost. We can do one session only of compost. There are 2 main ways you can compost. You can do hot compost or cold compost. And doing cold compost, the way to go is doing warm composting. So if you don't have a lot of space, worm composting is a really good way to go. You only need a small box like the one I used at the video, and you can go pick up worms, or you can get worms from a friend, or there are some places that get worms as well. And just start to put your greens, basically. The only bad thing about, well, not bad thing, but the only not great thing about worms is that they don't like citruses. So don't put any limes or lemons or orange, because that would be too much acidity for the worms, and that's what you want to avoid. And nothing that comes from animals or oils. So whatever doesn't fulfill that criteria, you don't put it in the worms. And whatever it's organic, that means that it's green or fresh, or even if it's a brown material, can go in the warm compost. And for that, you will need more space. If you don't have 1 cubic meter of space that you can use for your compost, then I would suggest you that you don't try it. You can use the worm compost, and it would be just way easier. And Rebecca,
Does this compost attract cockroaches?
oh, the compost attract cockroaches. No, what attracts cockroaches is oils, and yeah, basically oils. Cockroaches decompose oils. So whenever you have, or fats, more specifically. So whenever you have something with fat or oil, you'll get cockroaches. So if you don't put any, for instance, if you made a salad and you put an oil dressing on it, then, and you put that on the compost, then you'll attract cockroaches. If you avoid putting any oils on your compost, you won't attract cockroaches. Okay, actually, that's why cockroaches gather up in the kitchen, because there's a lot of oil or fat like laying around, and that's why what they eat. Oh, that's a good one. For instance, if you could imagine this being our compost and our worms being there, what do you want to do? You can put a cantaloupe, even you cut it in half and then put the fresh part of the cantaloupe looking towards the worms, and the worms love that, and they will come up and start eating the cantaloupe. So you literally, you'll take them away. That's one way to go. Another one is if you have some sort of net that's thick enough for the worms to go through. That's what you normally do. You put the net, and then you put fresh batch of organic material on top of that. So the worms go up to the new organic material, and then you put your mesh or your net away from that. You collect the compost, and then you put your worms back in. That's the process. In both processes, where do you sell worms? That's a good question. We do sell worms. We don't have a lot of worms, but actually what I would suggest for you is to get your own worms out of the garden or soil patch that you have around home, because the more efficient worms are the local worms. So they are used to the area, and they are used to like the atmosphere. So that would be the best for you. If you get to collect 20 or 30 worms, that's the perfect amount for you to start. They will start to reproduce, and you'll do great. You'll get a lot of worms.
Cristina Artaza is saying that she has worms, so if you would like some, you can contact her to get some.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cristina.
You can get worms out of worms, or you can get worms out of worms' eggs. So if any of you have already started a worm bean, you can give worms to other people, but also you can look for the little eggs that are like little yellow like capsules, and those are the worm's eggs. So any of those can hatch around 10 to 30 worms. So that's good. And at last, the bulk purchasing. This is the part that you were also asking about. We do our bulk purchasing at Estación R, but there's a lot of places you can go. The ideal thing is that you could bulk purchase whatever or almost everything you buy. What we suggest is that you, before you go to all those things, do you take your own containers? Yes, you can take your own containers, and that was what I was going to say. We suggest that you think on the amount of any product that you actually use in a week or in a 2-week period of time, and then go with that container, because sometimes you go with a huge container and it turns out that you don't actually buy a lot of camu camu, for instance, right? So, or you go with a really small container and you, I don't know, you need 2 kilos of oatmeal. So if you make your list before and then you figure out the containers, that's a really more efficient way to start doing this. Another thing you have to consider is doing glass instead of plastic, if you can, to the most part. And this way, it's really simple to start being more conscious about the quantity of food that we eat per week. And doing this is really good actually for our finance, because then you start to really see where you're getting your things from and how much are you spending on them. Es seguro comprar muy caro por no, not really. I mean, it's as safe as anything else from the moment being. I would suggest for you to wait a little bit if you want to start the bulk purchasing until you get to a point that you are comfortable with your supplier. We are really comfortable with ours because we've been working with them for some time now, and we know that they are very like strict with their hygiene. But if you don't have access to one for the time being, I would suggest for you to hold a little until you're really comfortable with it. And the next step of bulk purchasing, and it merges with the weekly cooking, it's how you use your food, in the sense of there's a lot of ways that you can use your food in more than one sense. There's a lot of ferments that you can do out of the things that you don't eat. And there's a lot of also like mermeladas or soups or conservas that you can create out of this. So it's a really like complete process. If you start doing it one by one, at the end of the day, you'll be doing all of them and you won't even notice. And it's also fun. Where can I buy seeds and seeds for vegetables gardens? You can buy seeds at EcoHuerto as well. You can, but really wherever you can find them. Even you can get your own seeds. That's a really good way to go. If you don't have seeds available, but you have a tomato or you have a cucumber or you have even a pepper or cantaloupe, you can get the seeds out of that and they would have to go through a fermentation process. You can look for that up. It's really simple. You just put water on it basically and let it sit. And then you'll start with those seeds, and you can eventually start growing different food of it. What would I would suggest is to start growing your own seeds out of the food you eat. So you can get seeds out of your own onions, you can get seeds out of lettuces, you can get seeds out of the veggies I previously said, also watermelon, basically all ripened fruits that you can get your hands in.